take this discussion forwards. So again, I'm going to ask Haitham Alqassab, who's the Senior Consultant Fire and Life Safety for WSP, to the stage. Next is a good friend of mine, Phil Witts, the COO of ATEIS. Paul Calderwood, who's a retired Deputy Chief from Everett Fire Department in the US. Thank you, my friend. And last but by no means least, Tarek Al Asil, the Executive Director for Facilities Management, who really is probably the linchpin for this discussion. So they've put a seat for me there, but I very rarely sit down when I'm up on stage doing this bit. So this discussion is to do with the design to demolition of buildings and the built environment. So we met briefly last week just to outline some of the topic areas, and I will try and stay within those. So when we consider design of buildings, as a facilities management expert, what do you think is something we really need to bring in, Tarek?
Yeah, thank you for IFSJ, and happy to be here for the second year and then the third edition. In facilities management, usually as in real estate, it's coming about how you operate the buildings and how you upgrade the buildings. So it's very important for us on the design stage always to consider the future expansion, consider the future technologies, considering the any upgrades or tweaks where gonna give more comfortable to the owner or more safety. So usually in designs, we always try to be part of how we can operate, cause and effect matrix to be tailored to the use of the buildings. You know, that's the new trends is how you're gonna prevent the false alarms. This is one of our challenge. So for sure, there's a lot of technologies being now tested, and those gonna be hopefully gonna be implemented soon to reduce those false alarms where you don't even you're going to believe the alarm, you're going to act, you're going to evacuate when it's been asked for. But when some buildings we have the people they just get fed up from the false alarm, they keep evacuating for false alarm. So you know you lose those seriousness of the evacuation. So we need to have those on the designs, having the right detectors in the right place. You don't need to have detectors over the ovens. Those things which we need always to be considered on design, where we make our life and operating the building easier.
Yeah, I agree, and I think one of the challenges we have is we design buildings to be safe, and all the passive and the active protection that we put into them are fine until we occupy the building, and what we don't understand always is how the occupiers are going to use it, and how their lack of awareness of fire safety, lack of awareness of fire development, fire behaviour, and why those protections are built into the environment. I'm going to come to Haitham because I think you might have something interesting to add on this.
So first of all, thank you for the getting me introduced. I would like to add, it's important to understand first of all the history, what occurred in the past, from fires and what people tend to do and how they manage properties, and build on that, for the future. So designers has to think ahead and build it on the history and as a fundamental. And then we can sustain, and get resilient for projects, among different aspects where facility management has to understand what are the risks lies, either it's from a fire hazard, from external hazards, or probably man-made hazards. So it's really important to understand all these aspects and build it on that, including the environmental issues, where understanding the material and thinking of how it will impact in the future.
I think the sustainability aspect there that you're touching on really links right back to, as I said, the very first presentation, and also to Kyle's just now, where it's the longevity. So it's not just building sustainability, environmental sustainability, but also business sustainability is something that we need to think of. Now, obviously, bringing on the back of the occupancy and the way that things are used, Phil, I know you've got some innovation and some thoughts about the design phase of the infrastructure, especially around fire detection, etc.
Sure. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be part of this committee. So, yeah, there are technologies available that can, during the planning stage and the design stage, can be discussed and agreed with the client, with the consultant, with the civil defense authorities as to the efficient use and evacuation of people, or non-evacuation of people in the event of I like to use the term nuisance alarm rather than false alarm. So a very simple example, perhaps, is the technology in control panels now, where you can build in a delay, but also the technology in the smoke detector, and actually using that detector in the way that it's been designed to detect smoke or not. And this is the key point. So common practice here right now is if a detector in an apartment detects smoke, only the sounder base for that detector will sound in that apartment to contain the nuisance, which is great. But then automatically, after a minute or maybe 2 minutes, that floor will evacuate if somebody hasn't physically gone and inspected and reset the panel. Now, there's the technology in the detector to check whether there's smoke still present. So why would you inconvenience that whole floor of people if the detector, say after a minute, instead of evacuating the whole floor, can check and say, actually, no, there is no smoke now, and prevent that evacuation from being carried out. So it's not just us, there are other manufacturers with the technology, of course, but it's just using it in a clever way. It's there to detect smoke, so tell us whether there's smoke or not, and then build in the evacuation plan based on that. Yeah.
I think that's a really valid point, and we've all experienced the nuisance fire alarm, and we've evacuated buildings, either our homes or hotels or offices, and it's the interruption to the business continuity that we need to factor into it. So that's a tremendous idea. And that comes right back to Tarek's point about in the design phase, let's try and think about how the building is going to be used and how can we minimise the impact on the occupants of nuisance fire alarms. Now, I know, Paul, you've been involved in something recently that takes that a step further for the investigation. There always used to be what they call the double knock system. When the smoke detector would go off, we would go into pre-alert. As Ian was saying earlier, we've been warned that there's something going on. And then if another detector went off, that would be the double knock, and we'd then go into full evacuation. So exactly what you're dealing with there. But Paul, I know you've got something that's been looked at in the States that's a tremendous innovation.
I mean, basically, the fire service has, taken advantage of the all of this, new technology. I mean, just looking out in the hall outside here, you see all the new and improved products that keep coming forward, and it basically comes down to, what is the client willing to spend? I mean, the presentation on economics is a lot of the clients should be listening to that, because do they spend cheap during the building, and then find out, hey, we didn't get what we thought we got. Now we got to pay again to get it upgraded or replaced, and it's going to take a lot to get to the right place. And in the meantime, they're going to spend double to get to that point.
Yep, I fully understand that. And again, as we talked in our pre-meeting, we talked about the ability to, as we design buildings, to factor in the advances in technology, the changes in detection, going from wired system, hardwired systems to wireless, void detection. And one of the key things that we forget in our design sometimes is the maintenance factor. How do we maintain all these systems? Hidden detectors, voids, how do we make sure that they're done? Tarek?
Yeah. So it's always a challenge to comply with all the testers' requirements, and some of this test is being done only on papers, to be honest. And we know from our industry, it's always I'm on the bad side of the fire and safeties on facilities management, where we always have a challenge on loads of cost and loading of requirements to comply with. So not everyone from our industry understands the criticality of avoiding, and you'll find a lot of panels being sometimes switched off or being looped. So maintenance is very important. It's not only to be on paper. So we need to use technologies. So There's many nice technologies, as Phil said, it's outside now. You can connect a panel, and panel can do its own analytics or diagnostic of the test. So you don't need to do physically. You don't need to. It depends more on human. You can generate tickets to check a certain zones where you have alarm or malfunctioning. So it's about to use technology. We're trying now to. In facilities management, you know, the building management systems, usually the fire alarm going to be connected, and in many cases you find it as a separate PC or separate BMS because they don't talk. Mm-hmm. We need to find, you know, a platform where we connect everyone together and it really have one brain to the building.
I agree, and one of the drivers around that is the changes of use or some physical changes in the building, and how we bring in the new standard alongside the previous standards. I won't say old because that classes me as something I don't want to be. So, but Haitham, you know, what are your thoughts on how we integrate new technology into an existing building?
I think it is really important to understand and to address issues related to the transformation from existing buildings to adding any technologies into it. So as aspects of maintenance, it's matter of responsibility and taking, you know, a consideration of the risks. So as well as for technologies, you know, how to build a certain building which can adopt and can change over time. It's part of the design, how the vision of investments. So even nowadays, there are different technologies are introduced to the building. Buildings has to be addressed and been assessed accordingly based on what is introduced to that.
Totally agree, and I think one of the things that is the challenge is how people apply the guidance, because some of that's somewhat subjective. When we were back in the old Fire Precautions Act, and I'm going back to the UK, so forgive me, that was deemed as very prescriptive, and it was you have to do this, you do this, you do this. Now we have to be able to justify it. So there's an educational element for us as fire engineers and fire specialists, but also facilities management and building managers, etc. So how do we think we can cope with some of that, Phil?
It's very difficult to design a future-proof building or consider the future innovations because things are moving so fast. Within our industry, things don't move so fast, and because of obviously the regulations that we work within. But I think it's important for the manufacturers who are considering the new technologies, working with AI, working with more coordination of other products within the building to come up with an intelligent system using multiple products, to really share and educate as much as possible with our colleagues and peers and consultants, etc., as to what's likely to be coming. Because if you're designing something now with the technologies that's available now, and we're aware that on manufacturers' committees we're designing stuff that's going to leap forward, it's good to give you guys snippets of what's coming so that you can consider that in the future design, so that you're not left with a building that's not fit for purpose in 5 years' time, if there are any changes of use, etc. So I think this is sharing and exchanging of information as much as possible as to what's likely to come is going to help everybody in all the stakeholders, basically. Yeah.
Yep, perfect. One of the things that is dear to my heart is obviously the occupiers. And they're one of their biggest challenges within the building, and to make sure it's operated the same way. Paul, your experience is similar to mine in the practical side of stuff. What are the challenges you've seen with occupiers not adhering to how the building has been designed?
I mean, just there's no standardization as far as what an occupant training should be. Especially when you get into the high rises. This morning, we heard about, you know, e-bikes and, you know, and all the battery issues. You know, where should they be placing them? Where should they be charging them? A lot of the fatalities in the United States, especially from reports from New York City, they're storing them and charging them in access ways. So the bike, you know, catches on fire, and then all of a sudden they don't have a way out, and they've had a number of fatalities, because of that. And they do happen very quickly, without warning. And it's even cooking, it's no matter where in the world you are, you have people that will start cooking something and then go do something else. I'm multitasking. I'm doing the laundry. I'm making supper. And next thing we know, the kitchen's on fire and the cabinets are burning. There's a project I'm working on now with robots that will actually respond in a high-rise building. They actually live in the bottom of the elevators, and when there's a fire detected, they respond. The fire department controls them, and they can go in, extinguish a fire, and probably before the fire department even gets to the building, if not even out of their station. And just the water damage alone, if a sprinkler head goes off, and it's never on the first floor, it's always 10, 15 stories up, so you got water damage all the way down through. So, but the management companies they really got to step up as far as how do you train your people how to deal with smoke detectors and just basic fire safety in the home. NFPA is doing a great job with it. It just there's a lot of people out there just don't want to abide by the rules and regs. They make up their own.
And I think that comes down to what I said right at the beginning. It's about people's awareness of why the built environment is as it is, why we've planned it, why we've designed it to protect them and keep them safe, through to their understanding of how fire develops. We know the fire develops, doubles in size every minute it's burning. That's just an average, So the waste paper bin catches on fire, a minute later it's twice the size of that. So we're actually, that education could be something that we maybe thought about going forwards. I know there's different school education packages which are feeding at the bottom level because they have a lot of influence on their parents. So I think it's a very good innovation using that. But linking up with your robot idea, innovation and technology is something that we need to embrace. And I see that the robots could actually support Phil's idea with regards to the active smoke detector that will interrogate itself. So I've detected smoke, is it still there? Well, the robots could be used as part of that system to back that up. So we reduce nuisance alarms and reduce unnecessary evacuation. Now that's great for residential, but also great for offices or commercial premises as well. Because obviously the impact on commercial premises, if people evacuate, is if it's a shopping mall or whatever, it's capturing the escaping traffic and doing that bit there. We're running down on time, and I'm mindful that we want to hit on time properly. One of the things that we are supposed to be talking about is like the birth to grave of a building. Okay. So when we're designing a building, how can we factor in sustainability for the environment as we go forwards? I'm going to come to Haitham for this because I think you might have something interesting.
So it's really important to understand what type of material has been used in the projects, and understand the vision, how to reflect that, especially if it is sustainable matters, won't impacted by fires, won't be propagating fires as well, It's a bit of a challenge to understand how to match both of them and, reflecting that on projects. So it's really crucial to understand what are been used and what available material can be, in projects.
I think that's a vital point. When we design, how do we return stuff that is of a finite resource, like you say, the metals, etc.? How can we return those back into a usable form going forwards? I'm going to come to Phil for just one last point on that again, because capturing your equipment back from a building, is that sustainable?
It's a very good question. The lifetime of a fire alarm can vary, and it's typically going to be installed in the building for 15 years or more. We see systems out there that are perfectly operational and 20 years or more. But in terms of the materials, we do the very best we can in terms of the packaging and the materials. Obviously, the standards dictate that we have to use fire retardant plastics and these other things. So there's only so much we can do for the environmental side of things, but in terms of the regulations for recycling electronic components, obviously that's handled in a way so that we can dispose of those in a responsible way. I think the bigger picture is with projects now here, there's much more scrutiny in terms of the number of miles the products have been carried before they get to the project. So where are the products manufactured? How many aircraft have been used to bring them in? What's the green aspects of it? So that's considered right at the beginning through to the disposal at the end of the electronic components, and we do the best that we can. Yeah.
I think that's an excellent summation. I apologise to you, gentlemen. I've been flashed at red here, so I'm going to draw it to a close. For me, the key takeaway from this is let's look at the holistic design of the building from its concept through to its demolition. How can we factor that in to make it more sustainable and less environmentally impacting? How can we educate our building users, owners, occupiers to minimise nuisance fire alarms, minimise the impact on the building and keep them safer? So education all through the industry is the key. So thank you, gentlemen. I've really enjoyed this. Thank you, for audience, for your time and consideration to this. And I'll hand you back to Terry.
Thank you.
Thank you.